This YouTube series is made possible by the generous contribution of Insiders Plus members like you. If you're not a member and you'd like to become one, just go to smartrecovery.org/insiders. Thank you.
Today, we're going to look at relationships and the kinds of things that come up in relationships. Obviously, February is the month of Valentine's Day, which can be related to relationships in some interesting ways, socially and culturally. To help us unpack the issues involved with the relationships and sometimes the issues involved in intimacy in those relationships is Dr. Ashley Grinonneau-Denton. And may I call you Dr. Ashley?
May.
Okay, that's what I know sometimes that I've seen your reference. She is a PhD. She is also the co-owner and founder of the Ohio Center for Relationship and Sexual Health and Sexuality Training Institute. Dr. Ashley, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. Take me through your professional background and the kinds of things, the kind of education and experience that you have.
So as a clinician, I am dually licensed as both a clinical counselor and marriage and family therapist. Marriage and family therapy is what I have my doctorate in. And then really the bread and butter of the work that I do is informed by my training as a certified sex therapist supervisor. So I both spending a lot of time in the treatment space, but also training therapists and other professionals who want to specialize in sexual health.
And is that something that is widely spread? Or let's take Northeast Ohio. Are there a lot of sex therapists in Northeast Ohio? Is it very widely practiced?
No. So I'm one of not very many. I'm ballparking it, but I think somewhere around 16 of us in the state of Ohio are certified. And those people are not all therapists. Some of them are educators and counselors, counselors being in the medical field. So no. My job is a busy one, and although the sexuality field is growing, it's still a relatively small field, country and worldwide, really.
Sure. As I mentioned just at the top of the show, this is the month of Valentine's Day, and that's about relationships. But give me your take on the fact that Valentine's Day can have some interesting social and cultural aspects to it, kind of a lot of pressure for relationships.
Yeah, I think it can be an opportunity to take a look at what needs to be enhanced, and it can also put pressure on already existing challenges that are occurring for folks in relationships. I will always say, if Valentine's Day is the only day that you're focusing on what needs to be enhanced in a relationship, then it's really just going to be another day.
Yeah, and that includes a lot of our, I think, things in relationships where if it's just unbalanced, say, in one direction or another, including in sexual matters, then it can be problematic. Talk about how relationships and working with couples involves sex therapy and how that might relate to some of the reasons they come to you as a clinician.
Well, so anybody who is coming to work with me and anybody here at the clinicians here at our clinic starts by filling out a very long 10+ page sexual history. So a big part of my work is to not marginalize sexuality. Generally, people are not answering any questions or talking with any professionals about their sexual health. So not only what isn't working, but also what's sexually satisfying and what could be more sexually satisfying. So no matter what people are coming to address, whether it's sexuality specific or not, I do get that background and train other clinicians here to do that as well, just to create a sex positive environment. And with that, because I didn't always do such an extensive questionnaire, I find that engaging those questions and really thinking about those topics before talking about them with a therapist really helps people to reduce their anxiety around it and be able to address those things easier.
Yeah. Well, obviously, this is a recovery-oriented podcast. In fact, a smart recovery-oriented podcast. And we look at addiction to negative behavior. Are there some negative behaviors involved with couples and sexual health?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that can vary anywhere from desire differences, which can create some shaming and blaming of self and or partners, to, problematic sexual behavior, which can be problematic use of things like pornography, or problematic use that's more informed by the relational aspects of the relationship, not necessarily the pornography itself.
Right. Well, in Smart Recovery, we talk about the use of cognitive behavioral therapy, motivational interviewing, taking a look at what power within yourself can address the kinds of behaviors that you might want to change, including substances. But also in this regard, as you mentioned, pornography, other kinds of things that are having a negative impact. Do you use some of those modalities as far as CBT or motivational interviewing in your work?
I'm not a big CBT person, but I certainly, what I will look at most always is the form and the function of whatever behavior is being looked at, as something that folks want to change, or that is useful, maybe even. So pornography, for example, I mean, can be overly demonized, but if it is causing problems, what is the functionality of it? What is a person getting out of the behavior that they are engaging in, whether it's positive or negative? So, I mean, that does kind of skirt the lines of that same kind of approach.
Sure. Then how necessarily would you intervene or work with them to take a look at that? Are there specific ways that you ask folks to look at negative behaviors?
Yeah. I mean, for the beginning strategy is really to look at how it's creating a hindrance, and how it might be useful, it being whatever we are looking at. So just for the purposes of this, if we're looking at pornography, how is it causing challenges for self and partner? Because usually I am working with partnered systems, whether that's dyads or more.
Right. That's interesting because, as you say, the first thing you need to look at, or one of the first, is what part is this playing in my life? What function is it? And is that function taking the place of something that could be gained through a better, quote unquote, relationship with your partner, a more honest relationship? Do you think that that's true, that there's, that the function, you want to look at the function because it's not working for you or not working in the relationship? Is that kind of where people come from?
Sometimes, sometimes it is. Something I often see is a partner, since we're talking about pornography, we'll just talk about it, if that's okay. Pornography is a problem for a partner, which it needs to be looked at in terms of how that relates to the relationship. But sometimes function is not all bad either. I'm a proponent of looking at all sides of an issue. So is there something that a person is getting out of that behavior that is serving them? Is it something that's acting as a surrogate in a way that is damaging, or is it something that they need in their life in regards to their autonomous self? Self-pleasure does not take the place of partner pleasure.
Yeah,
and vice versa.
That's a very good point. I mean, the idea that pornography in and of itself is evil, I think, is not looking at it in all aspects, in all parts of what that might be in someone's lives, and in the enjoyment with their partner, and those kinds of things. And, in Smart Recovery, we do look at the fact that with some of these behaviors, for instance, a food addiction, of course, you have to eat food, and other kinds of behaviors, you have to engage in these behaviors. It's a matter of kind of the degree and the extremes. So you're right about shame and blame. And again, another thing Smart Recovery is about is not having labels, not saying people are addicts or alcoholics. And so you probably, or you can answer me, is something, do you label people sex addicts and that kind of thing?
No, no. One of my anybody who knows me knows I have many soapboxes, and one of those is that I don't like labels, period. And one of them I really do not like is sex addict. I find it to promote shame and blame, like we're talking about, and I don't find that to be a useful ingredient in people making positive changes in their lives. It also can really create an overlay that makes it really hard to look at ways in which behaviors can be enhancing or enhancing versions of behaviors.
Tell me more about overlay. What do you mean by that? It can be an overlay to the relationship.
So, porn, I was just talking about this with somebody that I'm supervising, but porn being blamed as the issue that someone wants to come in to address in their relationship. So this presents in couples often. I want my partner to stop watching porn, so that's why we're here. I would say never have I ever encountered that where porn has been the problem, but it becomes so big that it's hard to see past it. And that might be some deeply held shame and blame that goes way back to family of origin, for example. But if you're focusing so much on stopping the viewing of porn, like you're not going to get to family of origin and the issues that really create change.
Sure, that's the superficial or the most, say, visible kind of aspect of the relationship, at least in terms of one partner's view. But absolutely, I mean, it's to me, a person in recovery and knowing about smart recovery and other kinds of approaches, you have to get down to kind of what's causing that behavior. What are the conditions under which you are engaging in that behavior? So how do you actually break down, when it comes in and, as you say, very, very clearly, someone says, we're here because my partner watches too much porn. How do you direct them away from that kind of first level or superficial level?
Well, I'm a proponent of cutting through the bullshit. So I also I definitely believe people have the right to know where my soapbox lies. So I do talk about being a clinician that promotes healthy sexual behavior. And that means also looking at social constructs that promote shame and blame. But I also start by, and it seems to work relatively well, talking about the difference that exists between self-pleasuring and partnered pleasure. If somebody's watching porn, the idea is that they're not deeply, vulnerably connected to the visual stimulus that they have. That's much more surface level and much more shallow than hopefully a partnership between two people. If I'm working with a couple. So, I mean, the idea is not to treat masturbation and pleasure, partnered sexual pleasure as the same thing. So talking about those differences helps to create a helpful comparison and contrast between the two. I like to do that, and I think it's very useful.
You're listening to the Smart Recovery Podcast. Our guest today is Dr. Ashley Grinonneau-Denton, also known as Dr. Ashley. She is talking to us about relationships in this month of Valentine's Day. We're also talking about aspects of sexual behavior and a healthy sexual life. Do you think most people get to a healthy sexual life, at least, let's say, generally in society, and then also how successful are you, frankly, working with couples?
So I think people that are willing to approach sexuality as an evolving and fluid journey are much more successful at living healthy sexual lives that are congruent with their developmental changes. And I think when I'm working with couples, which I mostly work with couples and partnered systems almost solely, I think I know that I've seen a lot of success in doing that. And often people need permission to talk about their sexuality in an open way that they don't often get the permission to do outside of the therapy process with someone who's trained like myself.
Yeah, that's another great point. I mean, the permission needed to not feel shame. And, families of origin, let's say you're of a certain cohort group currently in your 50s or 40s, going back to your younger years as a 10-year-old, the sexual mores, the sexual conversation was so different among parents, was it not?
Generally, it wasn't happening.
There you go. That's different.
I think the loudest message in general was no message at all, alongside generally some kind of whisperings or louder, I suppose, dialogue about prevention, plumbing and prevention. Usually there's something about that, whether it be from a book or school or something else, but it generally is shock and awe, STI photos and don't. But any conversation around what to do, satisfaction and pleasure, not much of anything. And certainly generation that you're talking about, a lack of modeling of what intimacy looks like in front of children from a parental modeling point of view, usually relatively non-existent, at least
Sure,
only
sure.
the people that I'm working with.
Yeah, I will take some credit for attempting, at least I have a 19-year-old, and certainly my partner and I didn't try to make it this awful thing or something, and it was funny though, Dr. Ashley, he came back from school and really had more, I don't know how it was treated in his little sex ed class, but it didn't seem to be treated in any meaningful way. It was more that we have to get through this unit, and a lot of laughter and him and his buddies talking about it after. But since I knew he had gotten that, it was a entree to a conversation, and it's a needed conversation because of things like diseases and things like taking advantage of people, making sure that there's permission, making sure that you are doing things that are acceptable and welcomed by a girlfriend or a boyfriend, anything like that. So I am glad it's changing. I mean, do you think it could change more?
Yeah, and I do have hope that people will be changing. I think in general, I mean, I know just in the time that I've been doing couples work, I've seen a huge shift with people coming in preventatively versus reactively to work on sexual issues. And of course, in working with couples and plenty of people who are parents themselves, having conversations about their relationship has promoted positive strategies in raising sexually healthy children, which sexual discussions can begin and be normalized from the very beginning, which can create a sense of safety for kids. And I am a parent in some capacity to 5 lovely kiddos ranging in age from 6 to 22. And so I feel like setting a stage like you were talking about for being just able to talk about sex as anything else has really been useful for us, and really more than anything, just for the older kids, especially. They've said, we didn't realize how weird it is that we talk about these things because so many people don't feel like they can talk to their parents. And we actually, it's funny, we have a sex doc license plates, me and my husband, because my business partner is my husband. And really from any of the kids, the 14-year-old in particular, like his peers, instead of making fun of him, they've asked us questions. And I'm like, that's cool that you do that work. I didn't even know that was a thing. So I think that in and of itself is a testament to generational shifting. Just the fact that, kids are open because just a license plate gives permission. Back to that permission thing is being such an important ingredient in sexuality work.
Yeah, like you said, a small signal or a small sign that there is that it exists, that there's a way to talk about it. What about popular culture? Now, one argument I've had with my son, or I did a few years ago, I mean, he's an adult now, he's in college, but was the kind of music he listened to. The kind of what I would consider very exploitive, very crude, very, really distasteful. I mean, that makes me sound old, Dr. Ashley, but but I'm sorry, that's where I'm coming from. What about that music and the sexualized music?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting conversation. I mean, I think I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I would go back to form and function. Like, what is the function of those explicit lyrics? Is it just being treated as words, or are there messages that are being taken and translating in ways that are objectifying and not observing consent of another person? I think it depends on how they're being used and how they translate actually.
Well, I actually might, I don't know, this is a disagreement, but where I'm coming from is when it's explicit, when it's talking about the use and abuse of other people, I'm sure you would agree that that's not a good function if someone's like trying to relate to how that would be okay in any sense of the world. It's not okay to treat people as objects. Is that Is that true in your practice, in your view?
Some people enjoy being objectified.
Well, okay, fair enough, fair enough.
I think it goes back, that's why I mentioned consent. Consent with a capital C is really important. What if somebody has consented to their partner? Consenting non-consent, meaning I want you to objectify me, and that's something that turns me on.
Hmm.
I'm not
And
going
that's,
to take that autonomy away from somebody.
yeah, right. Okay, that's a very
I
good
live
point,
in a
because
different kind of world.
well,
I
but
function in a different kind of world. People are talking to me about a lot of different things.
and this idea, and maybe that's still more taboo, if someone would talk about themselves being interested in, a bondage relationship in some way. I mean, that's,
Which can be healthy and navigated in very healthy
yeah.
and clear boundaried ways.
That's right. The boundaries. That's important. That's a very, I think, a good point to make with all of this, because I certainly, in Smart Recovery, we talk about that self-empowerment, and taking a look at your behavior and maybe your substance use disorder, if it's labeled as such. And that comes down to addressing any kind of behavior. Now, it's we're talking about, in some ways, still things that are hard to talk about among the general populace, but they're real and they exist.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, let's shift here for just a moment to the kinds of information and even referrals for help. If any listeners out there are thinking about their relationships and kind of the things that they're involved in and the things they may want to address, how do they get in touch with you as a therapist, and how should they approach? I mean, you use a questionnaire, which I think is probably pretty helpful, but how do people find you?
Well, Google is is a great way, and I can be found at www.ohiocenterforrelationshipandSexualHealth.com. I would say in general, because people may be listening from different places, the certifying body, ASECT, which stands for the American Association of Sexuality Educators, Counselors, and Therapists, asect.org is a good place to look. You can always find a professional worldwide who is certified, and ASECT professionals have to go through a specific prescribed set of training dimensions. So folks like that tend to be pretty connected within the sexuality community, educated, but also connected, and be able to provide other resources as well.
Sure. I guess I'm so assuming that in this world of Zoom, when I asked how people could find you, yeah, from Europe or any part of the United States. How do you find a related topic, working with others on Zoom? Do you do mostly Zoom now, based on our?
Currently, yes. With the global pandemic, I've been seeing people only virtually, and I honestly I mean, I'm an interesting case because I did plenty of virtual beforehand, so it really wasn't that much of a stretch. Certainly different than seeing people in the office, but I found it to be pretty useful. I don't know that progress has been less, honestly. So yeah, if anything, I think it's allowed people to access care to address sexual issues in an easier way, because it really doesn't even require them to leave, and people have different level of resources as well.
How did you get involved, and why was it virtual for you before, say, the pandemic kind of forced the issue?
Because there's a lack of trained sexual health professionals and certified therapists. And so, like, for example, just a few hours away from here, I'm originally from the Toledo area. There are currently no certified sex therapists. I'm working on making that happen, but there's people that have come from other states to work with me. There's people that have traveled when people were primarily coming to the office, hours to navigate sexual health needs. And really, I don't like that has to happen. So certainly I was offering the possibility of virtual consultation.
Right. Well, again, to give a little plug for Smart Therapy, this is the Smart Recovery. We were involved with virtual and online meetings way before the pandemic, because same kind of reason you're saying, that Smart Recovery meetings aren't available everywhere. But if you have a computer or smartphone, they're available everywhere. And that's an important thing that people have now gotten used to. And I think the future of recovery support meetings probably are in some way a hybrid of both in person and virtual. So, if the more people getting the help they need is really, in my estimation, the bottom line. As we're finishing up here, Dr. Ashley, how frequently do you see couples where also a substance use disorder or even another kind of negative behavior adds to the relationship difficulties?
I would say very often. I would say more than 50% of the time. You have to look at the numbers probably a little bit closer, but I would say very often there's a comorbid or co-occurring thing or behavior that's going on that is making it harder to create positive change.
Sure.
With the main goals at hand.
Well, please keep in mind SMART recovery as one of the multiple pathways to recovery for especially the substance use disorders and other kinds of negative behaviors. We've been talking to Dr. Ashley Grinonneau-Denton, and she is a co-owner and founder of the Ohio Center for Relationship and Sexual Health and Sexuality Training Institute. Thanks again, Dr. Ashley. Take care.
This YouTube series is made possible by the generous contribution of Insiders Plus members like you. If you're not a member and you'd like to become one, just go to smartrecovery.org/insiders. Thank you.